Hey everybody, I'm Jesse, and welcome to another edition of Gen X Thinks. And today we've got another user-inspired edition. We can thank Sharkignaw5856 for this one. He's a longtime contributor for inspiration and ideas for the channel, so I really appreciate it. Thank you, Shark. And today we're going to talk about technology, how it's evolved, how Generation X has seen technology evolve through the years, and how we interacted with it and whatnot, the stuff we had back in the day, and how it has progressed. The first technology, real technology I remember seeing was probably the Atari. What was it, the 2600, if memory serves? I might be wrong on that, but I never had one, but one of my friends had one, and I would go over to his house once in a while and play Pong and stuff on the Atari. He had a couple different games on there. What was it, like 8-bit graphics back then, something like that? We'd play that. That was my first real introduction with technology, besides radio and TV. By technology, I mean, in this video, when I mention technology, I'm talking about, computer chips. Something with a computer chip in it. Not the old analog TVs and radios that they did their thing, but then I'm talking about computer chips. Then the first computer I really remember messing with was the Apple. Probably the Apple II, the Macintosh II, was the first one I remember ever seeing. And it was in some kind of institutional environment, like a library or maybe at school. I can't really remember. But I remember before Windows and all that, the graphical interfaces came on. I remember probably in junior high being taught how to program or interact with the DOS prompt. I remember that vaguely, sitting in that class, and it was fascinating to me. But if you've watched any of my videos about my past, you'll know I moved around a lot, so I didn't get to sit through that class and learn from that class and move on into more things along those lines. The next school I went to just didn't even offer that class, and it just kind of went away in my head. I got focused on other things. Yeah, I remember the old DOS, and it was like a blinking cursor that the prompt, and then you'd have to type in the commands, what you wanted it to do. And that was sort of that barrier between you and the computer that made it, I don't know, it just felt different than the graphical interfaces later, because there was like that barrier. Then we all know eventually the first Windows came out, and I remember the first Windows in high school. That's the first time I saw it. Now, all of y'all might have different experiences. Some of you were, your parents were did a little better than mine did, and they probably could have got you computers brand new out of the box, and you had one at home. I don't know, but the only time I saw these things was at school or at some kind of institution like that, and they could have very well been 4 or 5 years old by then, so by the time I saw them. So I'm just giving you my experience. So the first time I saw Windows graphical interface was in high school. I was probably a freshman in high school, and it was just sitting in the corner in one class. I think it was algebra, the algebra class. And sometimes when we weren't doing anything or whatever, I'd go sit down and mess with it. But that was the first time I'd actually seen that Windows graphical interface. And of course, Windows has evolved since then, all the way to what we have now, Windows 11 or whatever it is. I personally use Linux. I use Manjaro. For those of you in the know, you understand what I'm talking about. I use Manjaro Linux. That's the one I like the best. And I use it because it plays the best with Steam's Proton stuff. So I can just play games on there. That's why I went through several distros to find out which one, played the best with Steam's Proton stuff. And I ended up with Manjaro. But I've used tons of them throughout my life. I can go down a list. I can probably do a video just on that. That entire thing has progressed through the years, and it seems like Microsoft just keeps getting more and more convoluted, and they've been taken to court for trying to monopolize stuff, and it's an old Bill Gates thing now. That's a whole different subject. Yeah, so we've had Windows since, I believe it was Windows 95, right? The one that got really popular in the 90s there, and that was the one where you know, about the same time that all the AOL discs were everywhere. You walk down the aisle of a store and they had these AOL discs in boxes and hanging on the aisles, and you pop that into your computer and plug your computer into your phone line, and that's how we got the internet back then. And we all remember that that noise, that dial-up noise. I can hear it in my head every time I bring up this subject. I hear that noise in my head. And about that time is when they had a whole thing with Steve Jobs. Remember, they canned him. They got rid of him off of the board of directors at Apple, and then they brought him back. They begged him to come back years later, and he came back, and his first thing that he produced was the iMac. Remember that all-in-one computer, and it came in these bright neon colors and stuff, kind of like our clothes did in the 80s. But that thing was iconic. I remember that. That was just one of the coolest things I'd ever seen. It didn't look like anything else. It was just really awesome looking. I never owned one, never even seen one in real life. I've only just seen pictures of them. But yeah, those things were really cool looking. Kind of translucent, and you could sort of see inside them. They're really cool. But they looked futuristic at the time, and they probably that's what brought Microsoft, or Apple rather, up out of the bottom of the barrel, because Apple was tanked at the time. It's probably hard for kids nowadays to imagine how bad Apple was back then. They were just garbage. Windows was everywhere, and Apple was just, just horrible. Their stock prices were junk. I wish I could go back in time and buy Apple stock just before they brought Steve Jobs back. I'd be a trillionaire now. But yeah, so then we went through those days in the early days of the internet with the dial-up and all that, and the chat rooms, and the floppy disk where we'd have to, you'd have a box of discs for games, and you'd have to change the discs out. And then they went from the 5-inch, I think, 4.5 or 5-inch, whatever those were, the really floppy discs, to the little hard ones. What were those, like 3.5-inch, something like that? Those were cooler and more convenient, the harder discs, and they probably held 2 or 3 times more than the original big floppy discs, more data. But I remember changing those discs while I was playing my games. One of my favorite games was, it was called Quest for Glory, and it was a RPG. But the unique thing about it is your skills went up by doing the thing. Like it had tree climbing, so the more you climbed or attempted to climb, the higher your skill would go. So you could just sit there for 3 hours and just climb this one tree and max out that climbing skill. Then you could climb walls and like a spider after that. So it was pretty cool. But anyway, and in the 90s, as far as video games went, we went from the Atari, and then Nintendo came out, and they turned out to be just a juggernaut because of the quality of their games, really. I mean, their system wasn't that much better than, say, the Sega Genesis or whatever, but their games were just really great. They were addictive, and everybody wanted to play Mario Brothers and all those games. So then we went through that. The 80s was like the Nintendo decade, really. And the 90s with the Sega Genesis and that stuff, it was kind of a competition between Sega and Nintendo. And then sometime in the 90s, toward the late 90s somewhere, the PlayStation came out. And the Sega Dreamcast was a big flop. Sega got completely out of the hardware game, and they just focused on their games, making games for PlayStation and Nintendo. And PC probably. But then Nintendo kind of had a rocky little time there, but then they came back pretty strong. And then the PlayStation was just turned into a juggernaut. That first PlayStation was awesome. It had just, again, the games is what really set it apart. That first PlayStation had insane games. Then we get into the 2000s, and we got the PlayStation, and then Microsoft comes out with the Xbox, and Nintendo's still in the hunt. They come out with the Wii sometime in there. And computers are just continuing to evolve. Internet is getting better because of the money they can make off of it. The internet providers are keep speeding up the bandwidth and speeding up the internet, so you can do more stuff on there. Early 2000s, you first started really being able to play video games online, stuff like that. And after that, it's just a race really to who can keep up, the video game developers keeping up with the speed of the internet. Because the faster, you could download and upload data, the bigger and the more complex the games could be. And that's basically it until you get into they start coming out with the social media. And when was that? 2007 or something like that, in that era. 2010 on, from 2007, about the time they come out with the first iPhone, they come out with the first social media, and that stuff just changed everything. And we got the internet right in our pockets now. Social media, playing hardcore MMOs right on your phone. I mean, it's just crazy now. Hard to keep up. There's social media and different trends and memes and all this stuff. Everything changes so fast now. I mean, it just is. In a week, everything could be different. And in a week, something that was so important is just gone. And now everybody's focused over here on something else that's so important, because the traffic and the trends on the internet and in social media change so quickly, and everybody's trying to keep up, to keep those clicks, keep those, eyeballs on their screen. And so nobody wants to be left behind in this age of internet speeds and traffic numbers and all this stuff. And that actually, it crosses my mind once in a while, but I keep rejecting it because I don't know. Yeah, but you see all this stuff like, I don't know, what is it? I can't even remember the word, but my wife keeps telling me about the stitches or glitches or something. People do something, I don't know, on videos like what I'm doing, and they do this little wonky stuff or whatever. It's a fad right now, or a trend, and I keep debating with myself whether I should try to follow these trends. I'm not going to. I'm just going to get on here and talk about nostalgia and stuff. I don't know. That stuff just doesn't interest me. It doesn't seem like real fun. I mean, maybe very briefly it could be a laugh to look at somebody on the internet doing something stupid, but I'd rather talk about, cool stuff back in the day and real topics that we should be discussing now in the deep dive, and, just honest to goodness conversation, not the twitchy, clicky stuff that gets popular. That stuff is like the tide. It get popular and then it'll go away, and then something else will get popular and then it'll go away. I don't want to try to keep up with that stuff. I got other things to think about. Hopefully I find enough people out there that enjoy this type of entertainment, this type of discussion, this type of interaction. So here we are, and now games look like it's going to go into virtual reality. And I touched on this subject a little while ago in a couple videos ago, but virtual reality, I actually have a set of those goggles, and it's really cool. I mean, it's really cool. The first time you put those things on and you walk around in there, you're like, whoa, it's just awesome. But it wears off fast. It's not worth the $300 or $400 or however much you want to spend, $800 on a pair right now, because it's just not there yet. It really isn't. The games and stuff that are there, they're just boring. They're, you know, little kind of, I don't know how to explain it, but they're not really deep quality games yet, you know. It's fun to walk around in there and do a couple things and just, you know, be fascinated for a few minutes, but it gets boring really fast. But that looks like the future to me. That's the way it's going. They're just the culture of gaming is that the developers make games on the platforms where all of the gamers are, right? And all of the gamers buy the platforms that have the best games where all the developers are. So the developers and the gamers have each other almost constantly in a headlock, because if either one of them move, they're lost. You know what I mean? A developer jump over and spend 5 years making a game for this one platform, and then it's, you know, no gamers go over there. They wasted that time. Now, from what I understand, they are starting to change that. They can make multi-platform games, you know, but still, it costs money. And until there's a big user base in this AI goggle thing, not AI, but virtual reality goggle thing, until that thing gets a really big user base to attract developers to it, it's just going to stay kind of a novelty thing, you know. And I'll leave you there for now. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and comment. And if you'd like to support the channel, you can do so by clicking on the thanks button down below this video. If you'd like to support the channel by buying me a cup of coffee, I'll leave that link down in the description. If you're interested in Gen X gear, I'll leave that link down in the description as well. I got some pretty cool stuff over there. If you don't want to or can't support the channel in any of those ways, you can always do so by sharing these videos on your social media. That really helps, and thank you very much. And if you have any ideas for future episodes of Gen X Thinks, please put those down in the comments. I enjoy doing these videos inspired by our subscribers. It's a really fun thing I get to do, so please do that. And thanks again, Shark, for this inspiration. I really appreciate your time, buddy. And as always, stay frosty, Gen X, and I will see you on the next one.